The missile came without warning. 1 second, the sky above Tehran was dark and quiet, dotted with stars that looked like someone had spilled salt across black velvet. The next second, boom. A wall of white fire swallowed 3 city blocks whole. A car alarm screamed. Windows shattered into a million tiny diamonds raining down on the street. People ran in every direction, shouting in Farsi, crying, falling over each other like dominoes. And right in the middle of all that fire and smoke and chaos, inside a burning hotel on Valuser Street, 2 people were trapped on the 7th floor. One of them was Zara Mensah, a 22-year-old black girl from Atlanta, Georgia, with natural hair, gold hoop earrings, and a backpack full of camera equipment. She was a freelance journalist. She had come to Tehran to document a story about women's fashion in Iran. She was supposed to fly home in 3 days. The other person was Jin-ho Kwon, a 45-year-old Korean man with a scar running from his left ear down to his jaw, cold dark eyes, and perfectly tailored clothes that somehow never seemed to wrinkle. He ran one of the most feared criminal organizations in all of East Asia. His people called him Gwizin, which means ghost in Korean, because he had a talent for disappearing before anyone could catch him. These 2 people had never met before tonight. They had nothing in common. One was a young woman chasing a story. The other was a dangerous man running from one. But right now, they were both on the floor of room 714, coughing smoke out of their lungs, as the ceiling above them groaned and cracked and threatened to fall. Zara grabbed the leg of the bed and pulled herself up. Her right knee was bleeding. Her ears were ringing so loudly it felt like someone had shoved a bell inside her skull. She looked across the room and saw the Korean man she had met in the hotel lobby just 2 hours ago. She hadn't known who he was then. She had only noticed him because he looked so out of place, too calm, too still, like a statue that had somehow learned to breathe. Now he was on one knee, pressing his hand against a cut on his forehead. His other hand was still holding his phone, and even in the middle of a missile strike, he was typing something. "Who are you texting?" Zara screamed over the roar of the fire. "The building is on fire." Jin-ho looked up slowly. His eyes met hers, and what she saw in them made her stomach drop. He wasn't scared, not even a little. He looked at her the way a chess player looks at the board, calculating, patient, already 3 moves ahead. "I know," he said quietly. Then the floor beneath them shook again, and a section of the ceiling collapsed near the window, sending a cloud of dust and plaster over both of them. Zara made a decision in that moment that would change the rest of her life. She reached out her hand to him.
"Come on," she said.
"We have to move.
Now."
Jin-ho looked at her hand. I looked at her face. Then, for the first time in a very long time, he accepted help from someone he didn't know. He grabbed her hand. And together, they ran into the burning hallway. But how did a journalist from Atlanta and a Korean crime boss end up trapped together in a Tehran hotel on the very night the Iran-Israel war reignited? To understand that, we have to go back. Back to where this story really begins. Before we continue, if you're watching this right now and this story already has you hooked, drop a comment below and tell me, where are you watching from? I want to see how far around the world the story is reaching. Drop your city, your country. Let's build a community right here in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss a chapter. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. 3 weeks earlier, Atlanta, Georgia. 6:47 in the morning. Zara Mensah was sitting cross-legged on the floor of her tiny one-bedroom apartment, surrounded by rejection emails. Not 1 or 2 rejection emails. 47. She had printed them out and laid them all on the floor around her like a sad paper carpet, because she wanted to see them, all of them, before she made her decision. Every major news outlet had passed on her pitch. The New York Times, BBC, Al Jazeera,
Vice.
Every single one of them had sent back some version of the same message. "Thank you for your submission, but this isn't what we're looking for right now." Zara had been trying to break into serious journalism for 3 years. She had a degree. She had talent, real talent. Her professors had told her so. Her photos had won a regional award. But the industry kept closing its doors in her face, and she was starting to wonder if maybe the problem wasn't her pitches. Maybe the problem was her. She picked up one of the rejection emails and read it again. This one was from a mid-sized digital outlet called Global Lens. Their rejection had been the most specific. The subject matter is interesting, but we feel the story needs a stronger news hook. Fashion in Iran simply isn't generating enough reader interest at this time. Zara crumpled the paper into a ball. Then she stopped. She smoothed it back out. She read it again. Needs a stronger news hook. She grabbed her laptop off the couch and opened a new browser tab. She spent the next 4 hours going down a rabbit hole, reading everything she could find about Iran. Not the fashion story. The bigger picture. Politics. The tensions. The whispers on social media about secret negotiations. The rumors that had been circulating for months about a possible Israeli military operation targeting Iranian nuclear facilities. And then she found something that made her sit up very straight. It was buried deep in a geopolitics forum, the kind of place where journalists and intelligence nerds argued with each other in the middle of the night. A thread started by someone with the username WatcherX7 contained a claim that had been mostly ignored. The claim was this: someone is smuggling something into Iran. Not weapons. Not drugs. Information. Digital information worth more than any bomb. Nobody had taken it seriously. Zara read it 3 times. Then she did something that most 22-year-olds with no money, no connections, and 47 rejection emails would never do. She booked a flight to Tehran. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, in Seoul, South Korea, Gwizin was having a very different kind of morning. Jin-ho Kwon sat at the head of a long black table in a penthouse office on the 42nd floor of a building that officially belonged to a pharmaceutical company. Below him, the city of Seoul sparkled like a circuit board. Around the table sat 8 men in dark suits, none of them smiling. "You're sure?" Jin-ho said. The man to his left, a thin, nervous man named Cheol, who handled intelligence gathering, nodded slowly. "The package has been confirmed. It's already inside the country. Our contact in Beirut says it crossed the border 3 days ago. And the Americans know?" Cheol hesitated. "We believe they suspect, but they don't know what it is yet." Jin-ho was quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, a plane crossed the sky, leaving a white trail like a scar. The Gwizin organization had spent 20 years building its empire. They weren't just criminals in the traditional sense. Yes, they moved money through shell companies. Yes, they had people in governments, in boardrooms, in police departments. But their real business, their most profitable and most dangerous business, was information. They were brokers. They found secrets, and they sold them to whoever was willing to pay. And right now, someone has paid them to find the most dangerous secret in the Middle East. A secret that, if it ever became public, could start a war. Or, Jin-ho thought, his fingers tapping slowly on the table, could stop one. "I'll go myself," he said. Every man at the table looked up. "Sir," Cheol began. "I'll go myself," Jin-ho repeated, and his voice had that particular flatness that meant the conversation was over. The destination was Tehran. He arrived 4 days later on a false passport that identified him as a South Korean businessman in the textile industry. He checked into the Noor Grand Hotel on Valusar Street, a tall, cream-colored building with a rooftop garden and a lobby full of marble and quiet music. It was the kind of hotel where international businesspeople stayed. Comfortable. Anonymous. He was in room 702. He had exactly 48 hours to find the package, make the exchange, and disappear. He did not know that a young journalist from Atlanta had just checked into room 714, 5 doors down the hall. He did not know that she had a camera, a notebook full of questions, and the particular kind of fearlessness that only comes from having nothing left to lose. He did not know that she had already photographed him twice, once in the lobby, once near the elevator, because something about the way he moved had triggered the journalist instinct she'd had since she was 15 years old. The instinct that said, this person is hiding something important. That evening, Zara sat in the hotel restaurant, eating gourmet sabzi, a rich green stew that smelled like herbs and lime, and reviewing the photos on her camera. She zoomed in on the Korean man's face, Strong jaw. Quiet eyes. That scar. He was eating alone across the room, reading something on a tablet, and he hadn't looked up once in 20 minutes.
She zoomed in on his hands.
There was a small tattoo on the inside of his right wrist. She had to magnify the image to make it out. When she did, she frowned. It was a ghost. Just an outline, barely there, like a watermark. She pulled out her notebook and wrote, Korean man. Room near mine. Ghost tattoo. Traveling alone. No luggage visible. Watching everyone without watching anyone. She circled the last part. Watching everyone without watching anyone. She had seen that once before, in a documentary about a retired CIA operative. The ability to observe a room completely while appearing not to look at anything at all. It was a trained skill. Zara chewed a piece of lamb and stared at her notebook. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his organization. She didn't know about the package or the secret or the 48-hour countdown. But she knew, the way journalists know things before they can prove them, that this man's story was bigger than fashion. She just didn't know yet that pursuing it would put both of them in the middle of a war. 2 hours later, the first missile hit Tehran. The explosion was so powerful that the hotel swayed like a tree in a storm. Every light in the building went out simultaneously. The emergency lights, red and dim, flickered on, casting everything in the color of blood. Fire alarms shrieked. The sprinkler system unleashed a cold waterfall from the ceiling, soaking everything and everyone. In room 702, Jin-ho was already moving. He had grabbed a black bag from under his bed, always prepared, always ready, and was heading for the door when the second missile struck something close. Much closer. The wall on the south side of his room cracked like an eggshell. A piece of plaster the size of a dinner table fell from the ceiling and landed 3 inches from his foot. He backed up. The hallway was the only way out, and the hallway was on fire. In room 714, Zara had been thrown out of her desk chair by the first blast. She hit the wall, slid to the floor, and lay still for 3 seconds while her brain tried to understand what had just happened. Then training kicked in, not combat training, but the kind of mental preparation that good journalists do before going into dangerous places. She had taken a safety course before the trip. She remembered. Low to the ground. Away from glass. Find exits. She grabbed her camera bag because she was 22 and a journalist, and even in a missile strike she was thinking about the story, and crawled to the door. She opened it. The hallway was filled with smoke and orange light, and screaming people. And there, standing 5 doors down, was the Korean man with the ghost tattoo and the black bag and the cut on his forehead that was bleeding in thin red lines down the side of his face. He was looking at her, and she was looking at him. And neither of them said anything for 3 full seconds while the world burned around them. Then she held out her hand. Come on. We have to move.
Now.
They made it to the stairwell. For flights down, a section of the stairs had collapsed. There was a gap of about 6 feet between the 3rd floor landing and the 2nd floor. Below them, they could hear more explosions outside, distant now but getting closer. Jin-ho looked at the gap. He looked at Zara. Can you jump? He asked. Can you catch me if I can't? She shot back. Something flickered in his eyes.
Not a smile, not exactly.
But something close. I'll go first, he said. Then you follow. He jumped the gap cleanly, landing in a crouch on the other side. He straightened up and held out his arms. Zara took a breath. She jumped. She didn't quite make it. Her front foot caught the edge and she pitched forward, but his arms came out and caught her, and for one strange, surreal second they were standing in a burning stairwell with smoke pouring around them like fog, and she was being held by a man she didn't know, in a country at war, and it felt like the most dangerous place she had ever been. And also, somehow, the most alive she had ever felt. They pulled apart. Keep moving. Burst through the ground floor exit into the night air. Outside, Tehran was in chaos. Sirens everywhere. Smoke columns rising into the dark sky like black fingers. People running in the streets. Military vehicles screaming past with their lights blazing. Jin-ho grabbed Zara's arm and pulled her into a narrow alley between 2 buildings. We can't stay in the street, he said, his voice low and controlled. Obviously, she breathed, pressing her back against the wall. Do you know what's happening? He paused, just a fraction of a second too long.
No, he said.
Zara looked at him. You're lying, she said quietly. Another pause. And then his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Whatever he read there changed something in his face. The controlled calm cracked, just for a moment. Something urgent moved behind his eyes. He looked up at her. How good are you at keeping secrets? He asked. Zara stared at him.
I'm a journalist, she said.
I found them. I don't keep them. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said 5 words that she would think about for the rest of her life. Then you need to run. He turned and disappeared into the shadows of the alley. Zara stood there, smoke in her lungs, blood on her knee, camera bag over her shoulder, and watched him go. And then she did what any great journalist would do. She followed him. What is the package Jin-ho came to Tehran to find? Why did his phone message make him go pale? And what is the hidden truth that the United States is about to discover? A truth so dangerous that it could change the outcome of the entire war. We're just getting started. The answers are coming, but first, things are about to get much, much worse. Zara had always been the kind of person who ran toward things. When she was 9 years old, there was a car accident on her street in Atlanta. Every other kid on the block ran inside and pressed their faces against the window. Zara ran outside with her mother's phone and started taking pictures. Her mama had snatched the phone from her hand and marched her back inside by the ear, but not before Zara had gotten 6 clear shots of the whole scene. Her teacher had called it reckless. Her father had called it a gift. Right now, running through the burning backstreets of Tehran at midnight while missile sirens wailed overhead, and a mysterious Korean man with a ghost tattoo melted into the darkness ahead of her, she was starting to think maybe her teacher had been right. But she kept running anyway. Jin-ho moved fast for a man his age. He moved the way water moves, not in a straight line, but always finding the fastest path, slipping through gaps, never stopping, never hesitating. He turned left into a narrow alley, right through a covered market that had been abandoned in the panic. Left again through a gap between 2 apartment buildings so tight that Zara had to turn sideways to squeeze through. She almost lost him twice. The second time, she rounded a corner, and the alley was empty. She stopped breathing hard and looked both ways. Nothing. Just darkness and the distant orange glow of fires and the echo of sirens bouncing off the walls. Her heart hammered. Then a hand came out of nowhere and grabbed her wrist, and she nearly screamed, but a second hand covered her mouth, and a low voice said in her ear, "Stop making noise." She was pulled sideways through a doorway she hadn't even seen, a narrow wooden door set so flush with the wall it was almost invisible, and then she was inside a small dark room that smelled like motor oil and old cardboard, and the door closed behind them. Silence. Or, not silence exactly. She could still hear the sirens outside, muffled now. She could hear her own heartbeat. She could hear Jin-ho breathing in the darkness beside her. She yanked her wrist free. "Don't," she hissed. "Grab me like that. You were about to walk into a patrol." His voice was completely calm. Iranian Revolutionary Guard. For soldiers. If they had seen you, a young foreign woman running through the streets alone at midnight during a missile attack, you would currently be in the back of a military vehicle explaining yourself in a language you don't speak. Zara opened her mouth. I closed it. He had a point. She hated that he had a point. Fine, she breathed. But don't cover my mouth. Ever. I bite. In the darkness, she thought she heard something. Not quite a laugh. More like the sound a person makes when they're suppressing one very hard. Noted, Jin-ho said. He pulled out his phone and turned on a low flashlight setting, just enough to see the room. It was a storage space. Shelves of old spare parts, dusty boxes, a broken fan in the corner. There was a workbench against one wall with tools hanging above it, and a single wooden stool that looked like it would collapse if you looked at it wrong. Jin-ho sat on an upturned crate. He opened his black bag and began going through it with the practiced efficiency of someone who had packed for emergencies many times before. A small first aid kit, a folded map, 2 different passports, a slim silver device the size of a TV remote that Zara didn't recognize, and something wrapped in black cloth that he touched briefly, just one finger pressing against it through the cloth, before tucking it back into the bag. Zara noticed all of this. She filed every detail away the way only journalists and spies do. "You're not a textile businessman," she said. "No," he agreed. "What are you?" He looked at her across the small dark room. His face was half shadow, half pale flashlight glow. The cut on his forehead had stopped bleeding but had dried dark against his skin, and his scar, that long, pale scar from ear to jaw, looked like a brushstroke in the low light. "Someone who made a mistake coming here," he said. "Join the club." Zara pulled her camera bag onto her lap and checked her equipment. Miraculously, everything was intact. Her Canon was fine. Her spare batteries were fine. Her notebook, slightly damp from the hotel sprinklers but still readable, was fine. She exhaled slowly. "Okay. I'll tell you something true if you tell me something true. Deal?" Jin-ho tilted his head slightly, the gesture of a man who is intrigued against his better judgment. "My name is Zara Mensah," she said. "I'm 22. I'm a freelance journalist from Atlanta. I came here to cover a fashion story. I had 47 rejection emails before I booked this flight, and I have approximately $240 in my bank account and no return ticket because I maxed out my card getting here." She took a breath. "Your turn." A long pause. Outside, another explosion, far away, maybe 2 miles, but still enough to vibrate the walls and send a small shower of dust from the ceiling. "My name is Jin-ho Kwon," he said finally. "I am 45 years old. I came here to retrieve something that does not belong to the people who currently have it." "What kind of something?" "The dangerous kind. Can you be more specific?" "Not yet." Zara studied him. "The tattoo on your wrist. The ghost. What does it mean?" His hand moved instinctively to cover his right wrist. Just for a second. Then he stopped himself. "It's a name," he said. "What they call me." "Gwizen," Zara said. The room went very, very still. Jin-ho's eyes sharpened. And for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something in them that wasn't control or calculation. It was a surprise. "How do you know that name?" His voice had dropped lower. "Not threatening, but careful. The way you speak near something fragile that could shatter." "I Googled you," Zara said. "In the hotel restaurant. While you were eating." She turned her phone around to show him a webpage, a deep web intelligence forum she had found while researching Tehran. His name appeared in a list of persons of interest operating in East Asia. The description was sparse, but it was there. Jin-ho Kwon, also known as Gwizen, head of the Kwon Intelligence Brokerage Network, believed to be involved in the acquisition and sale of classified government information across 12 countries. Jin-ho looked at the screen, then at her. "You found that in one dinner," he said. "I told you," Zara said. "I'm a journalist." Another silence. Longer this time. Then Jin-ho said something she hadn't expected. "You're very good," he said quietly. Not flirtatiously. Not condescendingly. Just directly. The way one professional acknowledges another. Zara felt a small warmth in her chest, which she immediately pushed down, because this man was potentially very dangerous, and she needed to stay sharp. "I know," she said. He told her a little more. Not everything. Not yet, but enough to begin filling in the outline. 3 months ago, Jin-ho's network had intercepted a communication between 2 parties whose identities he was still working to confirm. The communication referenced something called the Cyrus File. He didn't know exactly what was in it, but his best intelligence suggested it was a collection of documents, digital documents, containing information about secret negotiations that had been happening between Iran and a third-party nation. Negotiations that the United States, Israel, and most of the Western world knew nothing about. Someone had stolen the Cyrus File and brought it to Tehran. Why Tehran? That was the question. It was like stealing a rare painting and hiding it in the very museum it was stolen from. Bold. Counterintuitive. Almost insane. Unless, Jin-ho had theorized, the person who stole it wasn't hiding it. They were delivering it to someone already inside Iran. Someone with access to the right people. What kind of information is in this file? Zara pressed. "I don't know exactly," He paused. But whoever paid me to retrieve it paid more money than I have ever been paid for anything. And I have been paid a great deal of money. Zara stared at him. Her journalist brain was running at full speed, cross-referencing, connecting, building a structure out of the fragments he was giving her. The Watcher X7 post, she murmured, almost to herself. What? Someone on an intelligence forum, weeks ago, posted that someone was smuggling information into Iran. Not weapons, information. She looked at him. That's what brought me here. I thought they might be onto something. Jin-ho went very still. Watcher X7, he repeated slowly. You know who that is? He didn't answer immediately. His jaw tightened slightly. His eyes went somewhere else for a moment, to some internal calculation she couldn't follow, and then came back to her. That post was made by one of my people, he said quietly. It was an internal signal, a coded message to tell me the package had arrived. It was never supposed to be visible to the public. He paused. Someone on my team made an error. The room felt smaller suddenly. So, Zara said carefully, the post that brought me to Tehran was actually a message to you. Yes. Which means I came here because of you. Before I even knew you existed. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled tight. Yes, Jin-ho said again. Zara sat back slowly. She looked up at the ceiling, cracked plaster, a single cobweb moving in a draft, and processed this. Of all the stories she had chased, of all the doors she had knocked on and been turned away from, she had never once considered that a story might find her. That the thread she had pulled on in the dark might lead not to a fashion article, but to something so much bigger, so much stranger, so much more terrifying. She looked back at him. I want in, she said. Absolutely not. I'm already in. You're a journalist with no money and a camera. This is not a situation for what? She kept her voice level, but her eyes were sharp. For someone who doesn't look like a spy, who doesn't fit the profile. Because let me tell you something, Jin-ho Kwan, I just survived a missile strike. I tracked you through burning streets. I found your real identity in 20 minutes on a phone with 40% battery, and I am currently sitting in a hidden room in Tehran with you, which means I am already part of this story whether you like it or not. Jin-ho looked at her for a very long time. Outside, the sirens were changing, fewer now, more sporadic. The initial chaos of the attack was settling into the grim, procedural aftermath. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter was circling. You understand, he said finally, that if the wrong people find out you know about the Cyrus file, your press credentials will not protect you. I know. You understand that I am not a good man. I can see that. And you still want to continue. The story is real, Zara said simply. And it matters. Those are the only two things I need. Something shifted in Jin-ho's face. A decision being made. Quietly. Internally. The way big decisions always are. There is a man, he said slowly, in the south of the city. A contact. He knows where the package is being held. I need to reach him before morning, before the city locks down completely. He paused. The streets will be watched. Military, plainclothes intelligence, foreign operatives. A Korean man traveling alone at night will draw attention. Another pause. A Korean man and a young woman, however, a couple, tourists caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, might move more freely. Zara raised an eyebrow. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend? I want you to pretend to be my niece, Jin-ho said flatly. I am 45. Be realistic. This time, Zara was the one suppressing a laugh. Fine, she said. Niece. Got it. They packed up. Jin-ho handed her a thin gray scarf from his bag. She wrapped it around her head and neck, not a full hijab but enough to be respectful and less conspicuous. He produced a thin jacket for her from somewhere at the bottom of the bag. She didn't ask how he had extras. She was starting to understand that this was a man who always had extras. They slipped back out into the alley. The streets of Tehran at 2 in the morning, 1 hour after a missile strike, were unlike anything Zara had ever seen or imagined. It wasn't pure chaos anymore. It was something stranger and sadder than chaos. It was the aftermath, That particular human moment when the worst has already happened and people are beginning to understand what they've lost. A woman sat on the curb in front of a collapsed building, holding a child's shoe. 3 young men were passing water bottles to strangers. An old man stood in the middle of the street, looking up at the sky with an expression that had gone somewhere beyond fear, into a place that had no name. Zara kept her camera in her bag.
For now.
They moved through the streets carefully, slowly, Jin-ho guiding them with a confidence that suggested he had studied the layout of this city long before arriving in it. He knew which streets had cameras. He knew which corners had military checkpoints and which alleyways they could use to skirt around them. He didn't explain how he knew. He just knew. They passed one checkpoint, 2 soldiers with rifles, a portable light blazing white across the road. Zara felt her entire body go rigid. But Jin-ho put his arm around her shoulder, lightly, naturally, like an uncle guiding his niece, and steered her to the edge of the road where a group of other displaced civilians were being waved through. They merged with the group. They walked through the light. The soldiers didn't stop them. Zara exhaled, so hard she felt dizzy. "Don't exhale like that," Jin-ho murmured. "It signals relief. Relief signals guilt." "I feel guilty," she whispered. "Of what?" "I don't know. Everything." He almost smiled again. She was becoming familiar with the signs, the very slight softening around the eyes, the tiny adjustment in the set of his mouth. Almost a smile. Close enough. 40 minutes later, they were in the south of the city. The neighborhood was older here, narrower streets, lower buildings, the smell of bread and smoke. Jin-ho stopped in front of a door that looked like every other door on the block. Faded blue paint. A small metal knocker in the shape of a hand. He knocked 3 times.
Paused.
Knocked twice more. Silence. Then a bolt slid back. Then another. Then a chain rattled. The door opened 3 inches, and a pair of eyes appeared in the gap. Dark, darting eyes beneath heavy brows, belonging to a small, round-faced man of about 60 with a white beard and ink-stained fingers. The man looked at Jin-ho, then at Zara. He said something rapid in Farsi that Zara didn't catch. Jin-ho replied in Farsi, smooth, unaccented, which surprised her completely. The old man's eyes went back to Zara. He said something short. Jin-ho replied. The old man looked at her for another long second. Then he opened the door wider. They went inside. The man's name was Dariush. He was, according to Jin-ho's whispered explanation, as they were led down a narrow corridor lined with bookshelves, a retired professor of linguistics who had spent 20 years as an off-grid information broker. He trusted almost nobody and worked for a very short list of very careful people. Jin-ho was on that list. Dariush led them into a small sitting room and gestured for them to sit on low-cushioned seats. He disappeared into another room and came back with tea, chai in small glass cups, hot and sweet and smelling of cardamom. He set the tray down without ceremony and sat across from them.
He spoke.
Jin-ho translated. He says the package is real. He has seen it. A digital drive, small, encrypted. It was brought into the country by a courier who is no longer alive. Zara's stomach dropped. No longer alive? Jin-ho listened to more Farsi. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes tightened. The courier was killed 2 nights ago, he said. Made to look like a robber. But Dariush says the drive was removed before the body was found. Someone else has it now.
Who?
Jin-ho asked. Dariush answered. His voice was very quiet. Jin-ho sat very, very still for a moment. Who is it? Zara pressed. Jin-ho turned to look at her. And now, finally, she saw it clearly on his face. Not just a surprise. Not just calculation. Real concern. The drive, he said slowly, is currently in the possession of an American. Zara blinked. An American? Here? In Tehran? During a war? Not just any American, Jin-ho said. He paused. A CIA officer who is, according to Dariush, operating completely off the books. Without authorization. Without any knowledge from Langley. Zara stared at him. Are you telling me, she said slowly, that a rogue CIA officer stole a secret file, brought it to Tehran, had the courier killed, and is now sitting in a city under missile attack, alone, with the most dangerous document in the Middle East? Jin-ho held her gaze. Yes. Zara was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then, and nobody in Washington knows. Nobody in Washington knows, he confirmed. The cardamom tea steamed gently between them. Outside, somewhere far away, another explosion rolled across the city like distant thunder. And then Dariush spoke again. One sentence.
Short.
Urgent. Jin-ho's face changed completely.
What?
Zara demanded. What did he say? Jin-ho looked at her. And this time there was no calculation, no control, no careful neutrality. He looked genuinely unsettled. He says the American has contacted someone, he said. Someone in the U.S. government. Not the CIA. Not military. He paused. The White House.
Zara's mouth went dry.
He says. Jin-ho stopped. Listen to Dariush say it again, as if to confirm it. He says the Cyrus file contains proof. Proof that 3 months before this war started, Iran reached a private peace agreement, a real one, a signed one, with Israel, through a third-party intermediary. He paused. A peace agreement that was deliberately sabotaged by someone with access to both governments. The room felt like it had tipped sideways. Someone started this war, Zara whispered. On purpose. Yes. While a peace deal already existed. Yes. And this file proves it. Yes. Then whoever has that file is either the most powerful person in the world right now, Jin-ho said quietly, or the most dead. Dariush said something else.
Sharply.
Both of them looked at him. He was pointing at the window. Outside, on the narrow street, barely visible through the shuttered slats, a black car had parked. Engine off. No lights. Completely still. Just sitting there, watching the door. Jin-ho was on his feet before Zara had even processed what she was seeing. He grabbed his black bag. He grabbed her arm, not roughly, but firmly with purpose. Back door, Dariush said, in English, the first English he had spoken, and pointed down the hallway.
They ran.
The peace deal that could have stopped the war. The rogue CIA officer hiding in a burning city. The black car outside Dariush's door. And somewhere in Washington, someone who is about to realize that their secret is no longer safe. Everything is about to collide. And when it does, nothing will ever be the same. The back door of Dariush's house opened into a lane so narrow that the walls on both sides almost touched each other. It smelled like wet stone and old cooking oil, and, somewhere far above, jasmine. Sweet and calm, and completely unbothered by the fact that the city around it was falling apart.
Zara ran.
Jin-ho ran beside her. Behind them, they heard the front door of Dariush's house splinter open, one sharp crack like a bone breaking, then heavy boots on tile, then voices shouting in Farsi. Urgent.
Angry.
Getting louder. They didn't look back. 3 turns. 2 alleys. One low wall that Jin-ho cleared in a single clean motion like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Zara hit the same wall half a second later, grabbed the top with both hands, hauled herself over, and landed on the other side in a graceless heap that she would never, under any circumstances, describe to anyone ever. She was on her feet before Jin-ho could offer a hand. I'm fine, she said, before he could say anything. I wasn't going to say anything, he said. Good. They kept moving. For blocks away, tucked inside a half-collapsed parking structure that smelled like rust and pigeons, they stopped. Jin-ho pressed his back against a concrete pillar and scanned the entrance behind them. Nothing followed. No boots. No headlights. Just the distant sound of sirens and the occasional low rumble of something, military vehicles, maybe, or more strikes hitting farther parts of the city. Zara bent over with her hands on her knees and breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way her track coach had taught her in 9th grade. She hadn't run like that in years. Who were they? She managed between breaths. Hard to say. Jin-ho was barely breathing hard at all, which was deeply annoying. IRGC intelligence. Private contractors. Could be either. Could I be American?
He paused.
Possibly. The rogue CIA officer.
Possibly, he said again.
Zara straightened up. She pulled her notebook from her bag, damp, battered, but still holding together, and started writing. Fast, messy, shorthand that only she could read. She wrote everything Dariush had said. The Cyrus file, the peace agreement, the sabotage, the courier who is no longer alive. Jin-ho watched her write. "What are you doing?" he asked. "My job," she said without looking up. "This is not the time. It's always the time." She kept writing. "If something happens to us tonight, this notebook is the only record of what we know. Someone needs to find it. Someone needs to tell this story." Jin-ho was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down on a low concrete ledge and opened his black bag and pulled out the slim silver device she had noticed earlier. Back in Dariush's storage room. Up close, she could see it was some kind of signal scanner. Small screen, a few buttons, a short antenna. He turned it on and watched the screen with focused eyes. "Searching for the drive?" Zara asked. "Searching for Americans." He adjusted the antenna slightly. "The drive will be with him. Or her. You don't know which?" Dariush only said American. No name. No description. Zara thought about this. A rogue CIA officer operating without authorization in a war zone, in possession of a document that proves someone deliberately started this war. She tapped her pen against her notebook. That is either the bravest person alive or the most reckless. "In my experience," Jin-ho said, eyes still on the scanner, "the line between those two things is very thin." The scanner beeped softly.
Once.
Then again. Jin-ho's eyes sharpened. "There," he said quietly. The signal led them east, deeper into the older part of the city, away from the main boulevards and the government buildings and the international hotels. The streets here were quieter, narrower. The buildings leaned toward each other overhead like old friends sharing secrets. Laundry lines hung between windows even at this hour, clothes swaying gently in the warm night air. They moved carefully. Slowly now, no more running. Jin-ho had the scanner in his jacket pocket, checking it every 30 seconds. Zara stayed half a step behind him and slightly to the left, the way she'd seen security personnel position themselves in documentaries. She didn't know if it was the right instinct. She went with it anyway. 2 blocks. 3. The signal is getting stronger. Then Jin-ho stopped. They were standing outside a small tea house, closed, dark, metal shutters pulled down over the windows. An unremarkable building. The kind of place you'd walk past 100 times without noticing. But there was a faint light visible through a crack in the shutters. The thinnest sliver of yellow light, barely there. Like someone inside was trying very hard not to be seen. Jin-ho looked at Zara. Zara looked at Jin-ho. She held up 3 fingers, asking silently, "3 people?" He shook his head. Held up 1 finger. 1 person. She nodded. He knocked on the metal shutter. A specific pattern, 2 knocks, pause, 1 knock. That meant nothing to Zara, but apparently meant something to whoever was inside, because the light went out immediately. Silence. Then a voice from inside.
Low.
In English. American accent, Southern, Zara thought. Maybe Tennessee or Kentucky. "Who sent you?" Jin-ho answered. 1 word. A name that Zara didn't catch. A long pause. Then the sound of a bolt sliding back. The shutter lifted 6 inches from the bottom. A hand appeared, pale, with a bandage wrapped around 2 fingers, and gestured for them to come under. They crouched and went inside. The American was not what Zara had expected. She had pictured someone imposing. Square-jawed, military-built, the kind of person who looked like a weapon even in civilian clothes. She had watched enough movies. She had a picture in her head. The reality was a woman. "I am about 35 years old. Medium height. Brown hair cut short and practical. Wire-rimmed glasses." She was wearing civilian clothes, dark jeans, a plain jacket, but she moved and held herself with the contained precision of someone with serious training. Her eyes were the most striking thing about her, pale gray, extremely alert, the kind of eyes that were calculating distances and exits even when the rest of her face was completely neutral. There was a laptop open on a low table. Beside it, a small black drive the size of a thumb. And beside that, a handgun within easy reach. The woman looked at Jin-ho, then at Zara. Her expression shifted, just slightly, when she saw Zara. "You brought a journalist," she said flatly. "How do you know I'm a journalist?" Zara asked. "The notebook. The camera bag. The way you looked at my laptop before you looked at me." The woman almost smiled. "I'm Agent Dana Reeves, formerly of the CIA's Middle East Division." She paused. "Very formally, as of about 72 hours ago." "You resigned?" Jin-ho asked. "I was about to be arrested," Dana said simply. "So I left before they could complete the paperwork." She sat down in front of her laptop with the casual exhaustion of someone who had not slept in 2 days and had decided to stop pretending otherwise. She gestured for them to sit. They sat. "You know about the file," Jin-ho said. "It wasn't a question." "I have the file," Dana corrected. She touched the small black drive lightly with one finger. "I've had it for 6 days. I've read every document on it. All 412 of them." And Zara leaned forward. Dana looked at her. Something passed across her face, not quite pain, but something adjacent to it. The look of a person who has seen something they cannot unsee. 3 months ago, Dana said slowly, the governments of Iran and Israel, through a Qatari intermediary, reached a comprehensive peace framework. Secret negotiations, 18 months in the making. Both sides signed. Both sides agreed to a full ceasefire, normalized trade relations, and a joint commission to address the nuclear question. She paused. It was, by any measure, the most significant diplomatic breakthrough in the Middle East in 50 years. The tea house was completely silent. Then, Dana continued, someone inside the U.S. State Department leaked selective, fabricated intelligence to both sides. Made Iran believe Israel was planning a preemptive strike. Made Israel believe Iran was moving troops to the border. She took her glasses off and rubbed her eyes. Both sides reacted to intelligence that wasn't real. And the peace agreement collapsed before it was ever announced publicly. Zara's pen was moving fast across her notebook. "Someone in the State Department started this war," she said quietly. "Yes." "Who?" Dana opened her laptop. I turned it around to face them. On the screen was a document, a communication log. Names, dates, message content. At the top of the chain, one name appeared more than any other. Zara read it. Her pen stopped moving. She read it again. "That's," she started. "Yes," Dana said. "That's the Deputy Secretary of State." "Yes." "He's been on every news channel for the last 2 weeks calling for escalation," Zara said, her voice going very flat and controlled in the way voices do when emotions are too big to fit into normal speech. "He's been the loudest voice pushing for full military involvement. He was on CNN yesterday saying diplomacy had failed." "Diplomacy didn't fail," Dana said quietly. "He killed it. Because certain defense contracts, worth approximately $40 billion, only activate in the event of active conflict in the region. Contracts connected to companies in which he holds significant undisclosed financial interest." The silence that followed was the heaviest silence Zara had ever sat inside. Someone had started a war. For money. While missiles fell on cities. While families ran through burning streets. While a woman sat on a curb, holding her child's shoe. For money. Zara felt something move through her, not panic, not fear. Something older and simpler and stronger than both of those things. Something that felt like purpose arriving at full speed. She looked at Dana. "Can you get this out? The file, can you transmit it?" "Every channel I have is compromised," Dana said. "The moment I use any official CIA communication line, they'll know where I am. And I'll disappear before the file reaches anyone who matters." "Unofficial channels?" "Same problem. They're watching everything." Zara looked down at her camera bag. Then she looked up. "I have an encrypted satellite uplink," she said. "Journalist tool. Issued by my safety course provider before I left Atlanta. It runs through a Press Freedom Foundation server in Switzerland, completely outside government infrastructure." She paused. "It was designed exactly for situations where official channels can't be trusted." Dana stared at her. Jin-ho stared at her. "You have a satellite uplink," Dana said slowly. I told you, Jinho said, almost to himself. She's very good. Zara was already unzipping her bag. It took 11 minutes to establish the connection. 11 of the longest minutes of Zara's life, crouched on the floor of a dark tea house in southern Tehran with a rogue CIA agent and a Korean crime boss while the city outside trembled with the aftershocks of war. The uplink connected. Dana began transmitting the Cyrus file. And then, at minute 8 of the transmission, the shutter at the front of the tea house buckled inward. Not from a knock. From a boot. The file is transmitting. The truth is almost free. But someone has found them, and they will do anything to make sure the Cyrus file never reaches the world. The shutter didn't just bend. It exploded inward. 1 second it was there, dented, groaning, holding on by sheer stubbornness. The next second it was a crumpled sheet of metal spinning across the room, and 3 men in dark tactical gear were pouring through the opening like water through a broken dam.
Fast.
Coordinated. Professional. The kind of professional that doesn't come from police training. The kind that comes from something much darker. Zara didn't scream. She didn't freeze. Her body made a decision before her brain could interfere. She grabbed the satellite uplink device and pressed herself flat against the wall behind a heavy wooden shelf, pulling her knees to her chest, making herself as small as possible in the shadows. The transmission counter on her screen read, "Keep going," she thought at the device. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Across the room, Dana Reeves moved with the speed of someone who had trained for exactly this moment. She swept the black drive off the table and shoved it into her jacket. Her hand went for the gun, but the first man through the shutter was already crossing the room, and he was faster, grabbing her wrist before her fingers closed around the grip, twisting sharply. Dana didn't cry out. She dropped her weight, spun her body, broke his grip with a technique that was clean and brutal, and over in less than 2 seconds. Then she drove her elbow into his jaw with a crack that echoed off the low ceiling like a gunshot. He went down. The second man tackled her from the side. They crashed into the table together, sending the laptop skidding across the floor, screen cracking against the tile. Jinho moved. She had never seen anyone move like that in real life. It wasn't the movies. It wasn't flashy or choreographed or accompanied by any sound effect. It was just sudden, like a switch flipping. One moment he was still, the next he was across the room, and the third man who had been moving toward Zara's corner found himself redirected with a force and efficiency that was almost polite in how absolute it was. The man hit the wall, slid it down, stayed down. Jinho turned to the second man who had Dana pinned. 2 moves. Both are very calm. Both extremely final. That man also stayed down. The whole thing took maybe 12 seconds. The tea house went quiet again, except for Dana breathing hard on the floor, one hand pressed to her ribs where she'd hit the table, and the soft electronic hum of Zara's satellite uplink, still transmitting, still counting up. Zara exhaled. Then I looked at Jinho. He was standing in the middle of the room, adjusting his jacket cuffs with the precise, unhurried manner of a man who had just done nothing more taxing than fold a napkin. There was a small cut above his eyebrow new from somewhere in the 12 seconds, and that was the only evidence that anything had happened at all. "Are you?" Zara started.
"Fine," he said.
"You? Fine." She looked at the 3 unconscious men on the floor. "Who are they?" Dana had pulled herself upright and was checking her ribs with careful fingers, pressing, wincing, pressing again. "Private contractors," she said through gritted teeth. "Same firm that handled the courier." She looked at Jinho. Someone tracked the signal. "My scanner," Jinho said immediately. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the silver device. He looked at it for one flat second, the look of a man acknowledging a mistake, then dropped it on the floor and crushed it under his heel. "How long has the transmission been running?" Dana asked, looking at Zara. 11 minutes total. "We're at..." Zara checked the screen. 83%. "How long for the remaining 17? 2, maybe 3 minutes." Dana looked at the broken shutter. On the street outside, still dark, still quiet, but not for long. "They'll have backup coming." These 3 were advanced, meant to secure the location before the main team arrives. She grabbed her gun from the floor where it had slid.
Checked the magazine.
Clicked it back into place. We have maybe 4 minutes before this gets much worse. 4 minutes. Zara looked at the counter. 3 of the longest minutes of her entire existence were about to begin. Jin-ho pulled the unconscious men away from the entrance and stacked them against the back wall with an efficiency that suggested this was not the first time he had needed to move unconscious people out of a doorway. He pulled the crumpled shutter back into position as best he could. It didn't close properly, bent out of shape, but in the darkness of the street it might pass for a moment. Buy them 60 seconds. Maybe 90. Dana stood beside the broken shutter, gun raised, watching the street through the gap. Zara sat on the floor with the satellite uplink in her lap and her notebook open beside her and her camera. She had taken it out, finally, because if they were going to die in a tea house in Tehran, she was going to document every single second of it. Resting on her knee, she looked around the room. At Dana, pressed against the wall, jaw tight, eyes scanning the street with the focused intensity of a hawk. At Jin-ho, crouched near the entrance, perfectly still, that extraordinary stillness of his that she had first noticed in a hotel lobby what felt like 100 years ago, but was actually less than 48 hours. She thought about Atlanta, about her tiny apartment with the rejection emails on the floor, about her father, who called every Sunday morning without fail, who would be watching the news right now, watching the footage of burning buildings in Tehran, not knowing that his daughter was inside one of them. She thought, if this works, if this file gets out, millions of people might never know your name. They'll never know you were here. They'll never know what it cost. Then she thought, that's okay. That's what the work is. She raised her camera and took a picture of Dana with the shutter. Then one of Jin-ho by the door. Then one of the 3 unconscious contractors against the wall. Jin-ho glanced at her. Really, he said quietly. Right now. History is happening right now, she said. Someone has to record it. He shook his head slowly. But the almost smile was there. She was sure of it this time. Then Dana said, vehicle. East end of the street. Lights off. Everyone went still. Zara's eyes went to the counter. The vehicle stopped. No doors opened. Just sitting there, the same way the black car had sat outside Dariush's house. Patient. Watchful. They're waiting for a signal from these 3, Jin-ho said quietly. When it doesn't come. 60 seconds, Dana finished. Zara's hand tightened around the uplink. Come on. Come on. There's a secondary exit, Dana said suddenly. Through the kitchen, there's a window. Drops into an inner courtyard. From there you can access the next street. She paused. I scoped this place out before I set up here. Old habit. All 3 of us? Zara asked. All 3 of us, Dana confirmed. But someone needs to stay near the shutter until the transmission completes. The signal weakens if we move too far. A beat of silence. Jin-ho stood up. I'll stay. No, Zara started. I'll stay, he repeated. And his voice had that particular weight to it. Not an order, but a certainty. The kind of voice that's already made its decision and isn't looking for debate. He looked at her directly. When it reaches 100%, you run. Don't wait for me. That's a terrible plan, Zara said. It's the only plan. I'm not leaving you here, Zara. He said her name simply, without drama. Just her name, spoken like it meant something. The file matters more than any of us. You know that. You've known that since the moment you understood what was in it. He paused. Get the file out. Tell the story. That's what you came here to do. She stared at him. In the amber glow of the single light Dana had switched back on a small battery lantern, barely enough to see by. Jin-ho Kwon looked nothing like a crime boss. He looked like what he actually was underneath all of it, a man who had spent his whole life moving through the shadows, and who was, perhaps for the first time, choosing to do something in the light. Don't get shot, she said finally. I'll do my best, he said. Dana took Zara's arm and they moved through the kitchen, small, cramped, smelling of old spices, toward a window on the far wall. Dana unlatched it, pushed it open, checked the drop. 6 feet onto packed earth. Manageable. She went first.
Dropped.
Landed clean. Zara swung her legs over the sill. Camera bag across her body. Notebook in her jacket. Satellite uplink clutched in both hands like the most precious thing in the world, because right now it was... She checked the screen one last time before dropping. She held her breath. The bar filled. Zara closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. The Cyrus file was out. It was done. She dropped from the window. The courtyard was small, 4 walls of old brick, a dead tree in the center, a cat watching them from a high ledge with total indifference to the geopolitical significance of what had just happened. Dana pointed toward a low gate at the far end. They moved toward it. Behind them, from the direction of the tea house, they heard voices.
Shouting.
Then a crash of metal. Then silence. Then footsteps. Running. Getting closer. Zara's heart seized. The courtyard gate was locked. Old iron padlock. Rusted solid. Dana didn't even slow down. She raised her gun and shot the padlock once. It exploded apart. She kicked the gate open. They ran through onto a wider street. Actual streetlights here. A few people still out despite everything. An old man on a bicycle who swerved violently and shouted at them as they sprinted past. Zara looked back over her shoulder. Jin-ho came through the courtyard gate 10 seconds behind them.
Alive.
Moving fast. A new tear in his jacket sleeve and a look on his face that suggested the people who had come through the tea house shutter were going to need significantly more than 4 minutes to recover. She felt something flood through her chest, relief so powerful it almost knocked her sideways. She kept running. They didn't stop for 6 blocks. When they finally ducked into a recessed doorway and pressed themselves against the shadows, all 3 of them were breathing hard, even Jin-ho, finally, which felt like an almost human victory. Dana was pressing her hand to her ribs again. Zara checked the satellite uplink one more time, needing to see it again, needing the confirmation to be real.
Real.
It was real. Where did you send it? Dana asked between breaths. 3 places simultaneously, Zara said. The Press Freedom Foundation server. They'll route it to verified journalists. An encrypted Dropbox connected to 2 senior Senate staffers whose contact information I found in a leaked congressional directory 6 months ago and saved because of journalist instincts. She paused. And my editor. Dana blinked. You have an editor? I have a potential editor. A woman at a major investigative outlet who rejected my pitch about Iranian fashion but gave me her direct encrypted contact as a courtesy. Zara allowed herself the smallest smile. She's about to be very glad she did that. Dana stared at her for a long moment. Then she laughed. Not a polite laugh. A real one. Full and sudden and slightly shocked. The laugh of someone who hadn't laughed in days and hadn't expected to do it now. She pressed her hand over her mouth almost immediately, like she'd forgotten how it felt and needed a second to adjust. Even Jin-ho's expression softened into something that, under different lighting, in a different world, might have been called a smile. They found a small mosque 3 streets over that had opened its doors to civilians displaced by the night's attacks. People sat along the walls, families, elderly men, young women with children on their laps, quiet, exhausted, surviving. A volunteer was handing out water and flatbread. They slipped inside, sat against a back wall, accepted water, drank it in silence. For the first time in what felt like days, they were still. Zara opened her notebook and started writing. Not notes this time, the actual story. The lead, the structure, the sequence. Her handwriting was messy and fast and alive, filling line after line. The words coming out of her like they'd been stored under pressure for years and had finally found a crack to escape through. She wrote about the peace deal, the sabotage, $40 billion, the courier who was killed, the rogue CIA agent who chose conscience over career, the Korean crime boss who came for a package and stayed for something harder to define. She wrote about the woman on the curb with her child's shoe. She wrote about the jasmine she had smelled in a dark alley while running for her life, sweet and calm and completely unbothered, and how that detail, for some reason she couldn't fully explain, was the one that made everything feel most real. Jin-ho sat beside her and watched the door. Dana sat on her other side, eyes half closed, gun still in her hand under her jacket, guarding even in exhaustion. An hour passed. Maybe more. Then Zara's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. An email. Encrypted. From a sender identified only by a string of numbers, but the subject line made her sit up straight. We received the file. We're verifying. Stay safe. This is the biggest story we've seen in 20 years. MK, Margaret Kim, Senior Investigative Editor. The woman who had rejected her fashion pitch, but gave her an encrypted contact. Zara read it 3 times. Then she passed the phone to Jin-ho, without a word. He read it. Passed it to Dana. Dana read it. Set the phone down carefully. Looked at the ceiling of the mosque, at the simple, clean lines of it, the geometric patterns, the quiet dignity of a space built for something other than war. It's done, she said softly. Not a question. A landing. The sound of a person setting down something very, very heavy. It's done, Zara confirmed. 3 days later, the story broke. Not in one outlet, in 17 simultaneously. Margaret Kim had coordinated a joint release between major investigative journalists across 4 countries. The Cyrus file went public in its entirety. Every document, every communication log, every piece of evidence pointing to the deliberate sabotage of a peace agreement that could have prevented everything. The Deputy Secretary of State resigned within 6 hours of publication. By the following morning, 3 other senior officials had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Within the week, emergency back-channel communications between Tehran and Jerusalem, facilitated by Qatar, the same intermediary who had brokered the original agreement, had resumed. It wasn't peaceful yet. Peace is never a single moment. It's a direction. A choice made over and over to keep moving towards something better even when everything is pulling you back. But it was a beginning. Zara Mensah's byline appeared in the lead story. Her photographs ran alongside it. Dana by the shutter, Jin-ho by the door, the 3 contractors against the wall, the mosque at dawn, the woman on the curb with her child's shoe. The story was read by 30 million people in the first 48 hours. It was translated into 19 languages. Her phone rang constantly for a week. She answered every single call. She was sitting in a small hotel room in Istanbul. She had made it across the border with Dana 2 days after the tea house, when Margaret Kim called personally. I rejected your fashion pitch, Margaret said, without preamble. I remember, Zara said. I would like to formally apologize for that. Apology accepted. I would also like to offer you a full-time position. Zara looked out the window. Istanbul spread out below her in layers, old and new, domes and minarets and glass towers, the Bosphorus cutting through it all like a silver scar. A city that had survived everything history had thrown at it and was still standing, still breathing, still full of people going about their lives. I have some conditions, Zara said. Name them. She named them. Margaret agreed to all of them. Dana Reeves turned herself in to the Senate Intelligence Committee through a lawyer 3 weeks later. Her testimony lasted 11 hours across 2 days. She was not charged. The committee chairman, in a rare public statement, described her actions as an extraordinary act of conscience at extraordinary personal risk. Her security clearance was permanently revoked. She was given a handshake and shown the door. She took a job teaching ethics at a small university in Vermont. She was, by all accounts, a very good teacher. Jin-ho Kwon disappeared. Of course he did. He was Gwizin, the ghost. Disappearing was what he did. He left no forwarding address, no message, no goodbye. Except 3 weeks after Istanbul, a package arrived for Zara at the offices of the news organization where she now worked. No return address. Korean postage stamp. Inside was a single item, a small framed photograph. It was the photo she had taken of him in the tea house. The one where he was crouched by the door, perfectly still, half in shadow, watching the entrance with those quiet dark eyes. On the back, in small, precise handwriting. For the record, J. Zara stared at it for a long time. Then she set it on her desk, right next to her notebook and her camera, and went back to work. bell, and that's a wrap on one of the most dramatic stories we've told on this channel. If this story moved you, surprised you, or kept you up past your bedtime, subscribe to this channel to support our growth. Every subscription helps us bring you more stories just like this one. Hit the bell. Leave a comment. Tell me, which character was your favorite?
Zara?
Jinho? Dana? Drop it below. And share the story with someone who loves a good thriller. We'll see you in the next one.